So one of the things I notice of onboarding, I think with games in general, because I've talked about this with prior guests in prior episodes, was this idea that there's this kind of the app store model of approaching
Mhm.
games where you're analyzing metrics, and I think this kind of serves to explain why a lot of game developers in indie or even just in larger games are looking at their onboarding like a metric exercise. Like, how do we get this number to go up? How can we get them past almost like making YouTube videos, like getting them past the
Mhm.
5 second watch mark, getting them past the 10. How do we make sure they come back? And I think my hypothesis is that you lose a little bit of a soul trying to go through that and trying to kind
Yes.
of make sure everything is measurable, make sure everything is being impacted. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's so refreshing to hear a take of let's just create an experience that feels natural and human rather than let's optimize every single step to make sure that it's super clear to everyone. And
Yes.
what's the loss there for you,
I
if there is one?
I could not agree with you more. I think that it is soul crushing and damaging to the industry that every game should try to be for everybody because you're never going to make a game for everybody. I mean, no matter what you do, there's always going to be some percentage of players who put your game down because it's not fun. As much as you and I are lauding Nintendo right now, there are people who hate Nintendo games. And I get it. There are different people's brains that work in different ways who are attracted to different kinds of things that they think are fun. Like I did not like Super Meat Boy, but I loved Hollow Knight. And the gameplay is somewhat similar in some ways between those two games. And the reasons that I did or didn't like them have nothing to do with metrics, in my opinion. I think that this is why actually I have found myself gravitating towards indie games so much. And you can read any number of people who know a lot more than I do about the AAA industry and sort of issues that it's having right now. But this to me is something that is a huge detriment to AAA, is this mentality of we are going to use purely data to analyze what players like if they're doing this, if they're doing that, if they're doing that, it does not mean that they're having fun. Like it's the it's not even commodification, it's like datification of fun, and I just don't think you can measure that. I think that games that are made by small teams, and I mean everybody of course will look at Expedition 33 right now, and I think that's very valid because one thing that that game really had was flavor. And so many of these games that are trying to do this across the board, everybody can do everything, metrics based exclusively, in my opinion, it really dilutes the flavor of the game. And games are such a time investment and such a personal investment when you get invested in a world, in a story, in a character, that it's really important that everyone, that like the game that you're investing in is worth your time. And I just don't think that there's such a thing as a game that is worth everybody's time or that everybody is going to get through. So I personally think that it is somewhat detrimental to the industry that we have become so focused on can every player do everything? And I understand the mentality. Again, in my opinion, it is tied to this sort of growth at all costs mindset that a lot of really, really large companies seem to have because they have really large budgets and really large, needs and stuff. This is why I, as I mentioned, have been playing so many indie games. I personally feel like these teams that are small, that have a vision, that know what they want to make and don't care if not everybody gets it, are how you get your Expedition 33s and your Balatros, these titles that are made by small teams with people who are really driven and really know what they want. And again, like I said, just it doesn't bug them if you don't like their game or I don't like their game. They love the thing that they're making, and people who like that kind of thing understand that and will respond to it, in my opinion.
That's exactly the feel I got from Expedition 33, is that these guys just decided to get together, build a game that they thought was fun. Obviously, there were calculations about the genre and kind of who they're
Yeah, of
trying to
course.
appeal
Uh-huh.
to. As in any business, you have to make kind of those assumptions, but it just really felt like something unique and different. And again, it was made by ex AAA developers, and they just got
Exactly.
together.
Yeah.
What do you think made Expedition 33 stand out so much? I think it's close to game. I don't know. Was it Game of the Year this year?
I don't know if they've had the awards yet. I
It's
actually
not.
don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. But I
It
know
may
it's
be
up there.
nominated, if not.
So what has made it so special? Yeah.
Again, I feel like it is a commitment to telling the story that they wanted to tell in the way that they wanted to tell it. And in my opinion, it stands as kind of in opposition to a title that I worked on, Starfield, which is the idea was you got dropped into this universe. You could be anybody you wanted. This universe is gigantic. Now it's up to you to make your own story. We have a story for you, but you don't have to play it. You don't have to engage with it. Expedition 33, while they do have a lot of, content that you can do on the side, that's open world, things like that, they knew what they were trying to say and they gave you a through line to follow it. That I haven't played a game in a really long time that gave me the same feeling that playing The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess gave me. That's one of my favorite games because playing through it feels like reading through a really good fantasy novel. You're like, I'm the hero. This is my jam. It's my story. I'm doing all this cool epic stuff. I'm fighting all these amazing monsters, and none of it would be happening without me. And that's the feeling that Expedition 33 gave me that was really exciting, in my opinion, is this nothing could happen without me. And that is a type of player fantasy that I think a lot of open world games have drifted too far from currently, in my opinion. Really, really massive games that, assume that every player wants to just be dropped in and given a blank page. But having been to a lot of game design meetings, I can tell you, not everybody thrives with a blank page. Some people want to have lines on the paper or an outline to start with. And there's nothing wrong with that. We play games to experience stories and worlds that are unlike our own. And I personally am most compelled by worlds that are driven by something. And the whole of Expedition 33 had this beautiful momentum through it that kept me. I'm a side content person, and I was propelled through the story on that game. So major props to that team. I thought the writing was beautiful. The voice acting was incredible. The art was great too. Like they really knew where to focus their attention. Like they weren't trying to be unique in every single way. They were trying to be unique in their way. And as we all have now seen, that is massively successful for them.
Yeah, it's an incredible job they've done.
It is.
With something like we've talked so much about Nintendo games, and I feel like a lot of it for us, especially kind of us going through our journeys right now in our careers, etc., we look back at Nintendo games when we were of a certain age when we played them. And
Yes.
I always think back to, of course, the world moves on and there are new generations coming through and younger players kind of that have like when I was growing up, I had my Game Boy. I had
Yep.
I had all my different Nintendo games. I had Pokemon. Slowly started expanding towards like PlayStation and kind of other Ratchet and Clank, etc. How do you think expectations have changed of newer generations? Would someone who was born in 2003, 2004, maybe a teenager right now, can they still fall in love with Nintendo games? Is it because we're a product of that time that we fell in love with like this narrative style and that
Hmm.
players nowadays kind of being exposed to the Fortnites and kind of these new battle royale games that are just like stimulating and addicting and
Uh-huh.
very, very powerful in their own way? Do you think Nintendo games still resonate, or is that like a nostalgia thing? Sometimes I try to remove myself
I
from
know.
kind of just seeing everything as like, of course, this is the way it is for everyone. It must be like it
Yeah.
can't be, right? So, what do you
First
think?
of all, wild that teenagers are now born in like 2010, 2003. Like that's
Nuts.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's too young. Um, I think that I really do believe this. I think that there is always going to be a place for the classic Mario games. Um, I live in Colorado, so we did a lot of mountain travel when I was a kid. And one of my favorite things about traveling in the mountains is there's very little cell service. What was great for us was we had a GameCube, so we didn't need the cell service. So we could bring Wind Waker with us, and go play. And it was always really fun to connect with people like offline like that. And I really feel like that experience does still exist. I still see it when I do wilderness camps with kids, when I, go up with my friends and their families, and I bring my GameCube for their kids to play Mario Party and Mario Kart and stuff. They do still love it. They do still resonate. I definitely agree with you, though, that there is a difference. I think that player expectations have shifted a lot. Games are noisier now than they used to be. Obviously, they look a lot better than they used to. We've gotten used to, like I was mentioning earlier, all that juice. We've gotten really used to that. And so when a game doesn't have it, it stands out a lot more now than when it didn't used to have it. Like, back in the day when when I was first playing Super Mario Sunshine, I love Super Mario Sunshine. I was actually playing that game again last week. And I think that like when I sat down to play that game, it was so visually stunning to me because I'd never been anywhere like it, and I had never had a, flood thing that sprayed water around or whatever. And I do still believe that that magic is there for kids. I think that games have held our hands a lot more as they've gotten more realistic with not forcing us to imagine stuff so much. I mean, as a fellow nostalgia gamer, I'm sure you have looked at things that you thought were incredible in games when you were a kid, and then you're like, ooh, that's really ugly now. Like the PlayStation 2 graphics, the nostalgia goggles, like whatever you want to call it. But I do still think that like there are rules to do with the gameplay that will always be compelling and that will always be fun. I think that it probably would be harder to get a kid into something like Mario World 3 now, than it was when we were kids. But I don't think that that's the kids' fault. I think that it is a lot to do with the industry, a lot to do with short form content and how quickly they can change attention spans. A lot more kids want to socially game now, which is part of the reason why we are making co-op games. Our goal is to basically try to create a retro platformer that is for two people and does have a little bit more of like modern sensibilities to it, to hopefully bridge the gap a little bit, because I would love it if they if everybody loved Nintendo games as much as I do.